Hi, welcome to Cubs and Culture for January 18th, 2018. This episode is going to be sort of also an off-season update, specifically around some of the drama that's happening between the Commissioner's Office and the Players Association. Because the Commissioner is absolutely determined to push through certain pace of play initiatives, and he has the power to do that unilaterally if he gives a 1-year notice, which he did last year. And the Players Association is apparently going to reject it, so he's going to have to impose the pitch clock unilaterally, which could be, excuse me, bad and increase tension between the players and the league because of just ongoing drama. Okay, so this offseason has been very, very slow. Very, very slow. And pretty much every single free agent we have who's gotten a contract has come in under their projections. Now, some of this is up onto the players themselves. So like Brian Dunsing, who was re-signed by the Cubs, he was offered his projections. He was projected to, he got $7 million for 2 years. He was projected to get $11 million for 2 years. The thing is, that was entirely on him because the Cubs offered him $7 million and he accepted. And another team, I believe it was the Phillies, offered him $11 million. So there's some cases where players are coming in under their projections because of the players themselves wanted or accepting a lower pay for a different team or whatever. Now, there are also other cases so there's this guy, he was a second half acquiring by the Diamondbacks. His name is J.D. Martinez. I don't actually know what J.D. stands for because all the Diamondback fans, who I also like the Diamondbacks, call them just dingers because he hit 29 home runs in 62 games, which is incredible. So Just Dingers Martinez is sort of his nickname. The other thing is he's actually more suited to be a designated hitter type because his even as a corner outfielder, his defense is not exactly great. Anyway, if this last year in 2016's offseason, holding everything else the same, he probably would have been offered already a $150 million contract for 5 years or 6 years. Apparently, his best offer has been $100 million for 5 years, which is substantially lower. So there's this worry again that players are upset that there might be collusion, i.e., all the team owners and front offices are getting together and saying, we're not going to pay X player more than this, and they all agree to have a ceiling. So obviously that will suppress wages. Now so the main thing I want to talk about here is sort of the history of the way in which players have kind of systematically always been excluded because on one hand, I don't really feel that much sympathy for them because functionally $100 million for one person over 5 years is exactly the same as 50. The marginal utility between $100 million and $150 million is so small that whatever, just take the goddamn contract. But on the other hand, I understand the long sort of history between ownership and players where there's always been some sort of tension. So if you didn't know this, for over a century, there was this standard contract clause. It was referred to as the reserve clause, where a team, basically every single year, the player was handed a contract that we will pay you X amount of money to pay to play these amount of games, blah 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 blah, and then at the end it says, ownership or the Cubs reserve the right to retain your services next season. Okay, and so you had to sign, meaning if you signed one of those contracts in year one, so in like year one, next year the only team you could sign with is the Cubs. So it basically made players having to, once they signed one of those contracts, because a reserve clause was always included, it basically made them bound singly to a single team. So before the reserve clause died in the mid 70s and the free agency system happened, it was basically a player was like, if you were a Cub at the start of your career, unless you were traded, you would die a Cub, and you had no real say in the matter. So there's that, and then of course the other sort of thing about baseball is it's a legally protected monopoly. There's been several times where alternate leagues have tried. The most famous one is the reserve clause was so hated, like in the 1880s and 1890s, there was this players league where they tried to get a league started where it was the ownership, like the owners were the players. It was crushed economically. And so there weren't reserve clause, blah, blah, blah. It was also the Federal League, which tried to compete with the American League and the National League. And basically what it boils down to, what I want to mention, is there was a Supreme Court case like in the mid-20s that ruled, and I'm basically quoting the case at this point, that while baseball was a business, it wasn't commerce in the general, what was accepted as the general definition of commerce, which is sort of nonsense. So it was explicitly exempted from antitrust laws. So the reason why I'm mentioning this is politically or socially or economically, I have a huge sort of problem with player salaries, but it's not really the players, necessarily the players themselves. It's the consequence of the system, and that the reserve clause, like because of the way in which free agency is structured, you have a period of time basically where you are operating under the reserve clause system, and then you become a free agent. But because it's staggered, so like you have to play, I believe it's 5 years of before you're a free agent, eligible or whatever. And then there's different levels. So like before you become a free agent, you can have your salary go to arbitration, etc. But the point of the matter is, there's still for the bulk of players in the system, minor leaguers and major leaguers, for the first few years, they're still operating under the reserve system. It's only after a certain period of time you excuse me, have a group of free agents. So because of that, the market, it's not a free market, it's a bound market. Because there's largely the reserve system, and then there's a smaller group of free agents who can pick their own thing, but because it's only a couple a year, there's only so many slots available. So if you don't, so like for example, this year in free agency, there's only two really top line pitchers. There's Yu Darvish and Jake Arrieta. So there's two players trying to have 30 teams fight out against them. So he begins a bidding war, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm mentioning this because as a baseball fan, it's really annoying to see millionaires fight with billionaires over a couple of extra $1 million. It's like, just like, either the owners need to just chip in the extra couple of $1 million, or the players just need to suck it up, because like it's not much difference between $100 million and $150 million. So I'm mentioning this because we're kind of setting a stage for a big fight, especially around pace of play, because the players are absolutely livid about the possibility of collusion, and like I don't know where my sympathy lies. So let me pause there because I think I'm rambling at this point. Okay, see you in a bit.